All right, so that's recording. So hello, everyone. I'm Tim. I'm the instructory type person here at the Old Sword Club. Normally we meet up in person, but right now as the world is ending, we're meeting up online. And today we're going to be talking about Viking weapons or Viking fighting from a HEMA perspective. So yeah, sort of Viking Age combat's a bit of a weird one when it comes to HEMA because we don't have any sources. It's not historical in the sense that history being, learning about the past through analyzing documentation. There's no documentation of Viking fighting technique. There's no technical sources that say, this is how they did this. And there are certainly descriptions of combat, even in the Icelandic sagas, which describe combat from the Viking Age, but they're not technical sources. There's no specific details that really tell us very much. And they're also not trying to be accurate representations of combat. They're trying to be dramatic representations of combat. So I personally tend to err on the side of we don't know much from a technical perspective, which kind of means that, this doesn't really fit into the H of HEMA, and then you get into sort of interesting discussions with the European part, where in terms of the world at the time, the Scandinavian peoples, pagan Scandinavians, would have seen themselves as distinct from the rest of peoples of Europe. Certainly, they were to some degree linguistically distinct, although there were certainly mutually intelligible languages at the time. They're certainly culturally and for an amount of the Viking Age religiously distinct. And this is a period where there's not, and this is also a period where there's not really a concept of Europe. I think the term Europensis is not really used until after the Viking Age ends. But it's still like Old Norse is still a European language. It's still it's still a Germanic language. It's still part of that language family. And I personally think that, like the language and language you speak is really important, because the language you speak encapsulates some of your worldview. But yeah, so this is not really this is a lot of guesswork what we're doing. It's not a taking sources and interpreting them. It's okay, well, what can you reasonably do with the weapons when you've got a full range of targets? You're not doing reenactment combat, so you can attack to pretty much anywhere they would have attacked. What can you do with, historically accurate replicas? Like, how do they actually move, and what can you learn? And so I don't like to think of this as a process of discovery where you discover authentic Viking fighting techniques through playing with weapons, because that doesn't work. But rather it's a process of reduction where we work out what are things that don't work, what are things that they couldn't have done, and then from there we reconstruct something that is at the very least useful. Because there are a lot of applications for this in terms of experimental archaeology. How much damage a Viking Age sword can do is something that is kind of dependent on, learning that is kind of dependent on how you fight with it, knowing how to properly attack with it. Because, it's like a person can, when a person is hitting a boxing bag, you can hit a boxing bag really, really hard because a boxing bag doesn't hit back. Whereas when you're boxing, you're fighting with an actual person, you're restricted in terms of what you can do that doesn't open you up to being counterattacked. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. But certainly I don't think you should take this as authentic in the sense of this is what Vikings would have done necessarily. You shouldn't take this as, as sort of the only or gospel true way, but rather this is, we've got these weapons, we have a knowledge of how combat and how bodies work in many cases, from sources that are, only 100 or 200 years temporally removed, that are linguistically similar in the case of I-33, which has, old German, old German text in it. It's written by people who spoke a similar, if not the same language, and probably were, at the very least describing things in a similar-ish way. We have this body of knowledge that we're then applying to weapons to go, okay, well, what's a reasonable use of this weapon? So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I don't take me as anything more than someone who is, who is working out who has tried to work out a number of things that get you easily defeated when using these weapons. And, if I say something you disagree with, there's going to be opportunity for questions and a little bit of discussion at the end of each section. Or alternatively, if you're watching the recordings, and I've got a few people ask about them every time, there's always the opportunity to be like, oh, hey, what about this in the comments below? Cool. So I'm just going to pause recording for a moment.